Okay, good morning. Today's daf is Chullin Daf Yud Dalid. We are at the Mishnah at the very top of Daf Yud Dalid. I actually, because the 2 days of Yud Dalid and Tesvav are so tied together, I actually did just one document to cover both of them because we're going to have a question at the end of the day. And we're not going, in fact, we're going to have the question in a few minutes. And that question is not going to get answered until tomorrow's daf. So let me share my screen. And like I said, we'll really get started. So we are at the Mishnah near the top of, I'm sorry, not near the bottom of 13b. It's now we're at the top of 14a. We actually got a little bit further yesterday. And we are continuing the discussion of laws associated with slaughtering animals. So again, top of Yudalit Amud Aleph, Hashochet b'Shabbos uv'Yom Kippurim. If you slaughter the animal on Shabbos or Yom Kippur, Af al pi shemischayev b'nafsho, even though that act is subject to the death penalty. So the implication of this, the simple read of this Mishnah, is that it applies lichatchila. Shitaso sheira. The slaughter is still valid. Now, Tosos asks an interesting question. So we take a look at the top Tosos. Hashochet b'Shabbos chulu. Afilu b'mezid by l'ukminum. Ukumi. That in the end, and as we'll see over the course of the day, and frankly, again, the simple read of it is that we're going to say that this Mishnah is talking about lechatchila. But tema, ibemezid, if they did it intentionally, heich shchitaso kshera. How can we say that this slaughter is kosher? We've seen already earlier that if somebody who is a mumar, somebody who does not observe the mitzvot, does shchita, then we do not consider it a kosher shchita, and we say that you're not allowed to eat that meat. So how can we possibly say that this person who violated Shabbos is that we're allowed to eat that meat? So v'od the bekamara by l'ukume b'mezid v'Rebbe Meir. Moreover, we will see that the Gemara is going to have at one point the Hava Amina to say that this is not only b'mezid, but it's even like Rebbe Meir. The Rebbe Meir Islay, the Paragat Kama in Bechoros, he has the position Daf Lamed Amud Aleph, Uperak Zeh Borer, and similarly in Sanhedrin, Demumar Ledavar Echad, that somebody who is believes that one mitzvah is not from Hashem, that is that he violates one mitzvah, thinking that it's not a true mitzvah, it's not a command. Hava mumar l'chol Torah kula. That person is considered like a mumar of the entire Torah, and certainly a mumar of the entire Torah. You're not allowed to have their slaughter. So we're going to offer two answers. Yesh lomer dahasam b'farhesia. That here, when we're talking, when we say that somebody who violates Shabbos is considered a mumar, that is where they violate Shabbos publicly. But here, he didn't do it publicly, he did it privately. And so as a result, that could be the explanation. Umiyu, lamai demuki ka Rebbe Meir kasha. But it would still be difficult for Rebbe Meir because, again, Rebbe Meir says that the decision, that it's not about public violation of Shabbos, it's about rejecting one of the mitzvot. And if you reject one of the mitzvot, then you are considered a mumar l'kol Torah kula. And so as a result, by if we were to try and say it's like Rebbe Meir, even this answer doesn't work. So va'od yesh lomer. So as a result, Tosfos gives another answer: de mishum pam achas lo chashav mumar. And this is the way I would have to begin with, which is to say that if the person does it the first time, the first time the person sins, that doesn't make them a mumar. It's when they become habitually a sinner that they're going to be considered a mumar. And so as a result, if this person just, for whatever reason, he had a sudden craving for meat and therefore decided to slaughter this animal on Shabbos, again, he might be subject to the death penalty if he was warned. He would still be able to, the meat would still be kosher because he was still a good person prior to the slaughtering. So that is, again, the Tosfos then basically supports the positions that he's just outlined through the rest of the Tosfos. So we're going to move back to the Gemara. So the Gemara now.
We wouldn't consider a person who checks the animal for a chola as doing it lachachila, then, would we? Even though he's deliberately doing it because it's slaughtering because this person is sick and he's caught and he's slaughtering for. Even it is lachatchila, but it's for pekuach nefesh, let's say.
That is correct, 100%. That would not be, for sure, that would be a valid slaughter. Correct. That would be for sure a valid slaughter. So that certainly he wouldn't be considered a mumer, and he wouldn't be considered problematic. And this Mishnah is certainly supportive of that fact. Okay, so the Gemara now qualifies the Mishnah's ruling. Amar Rav Huna darash Chia bar Rab mishmei derav. So Rav Chia bar Rab said in the name of his father Rab, Asura ba'achil yoma. You can't eat it on that day, meaning on Shabbos, or of course Yom Kippur, but on Shabbos, after that animal has been slaughtered when it shouldn't have been, that meat is still going to be usher to eat until the end of the day. The Nas bin Chavraya Lamemar. And so the friends all got around and said, the group of people that were studying all got around and said, Rabbi Yehuda, this is Rabbi Yehuda. And so now the Gemara asks the question that we will spend the rest of today and the beginning of tomorrow addressing. Hey, Rabbi Yehuda, which statement of Rabbi Yehuda is this going like? And we are going to have 4 efforts. The first 3 are all going to be rejected and abandoned, and only the 4th will be an answer. The first 3 are going to relate to issues of muksa, that on some level this animal has been separated, is not considered some aspect of food before Shabbos, and therefore even after it has been slaughtered, it's not going to be kosher to eat because it's muksa, and therefore it's not possible. That is going to be the first 3 explanations. Again, all 3 will be rejected. I will leave as a teaser for tomorrow that the 4th one involves something different. We'll see what that is, God willing, tomorrow. But all right, let's go through the 3 answers for today. Amar Rabbi Abba, Rabbi Yehuda dahachanahi. It's Rabbi Yehuda about things being prepared ahead of time, namely, meaning that if you don't prepare something ahead of Shabbos, that means effectively that item is considered muktzah. It's separated. It's not considered usable on Shabbos. And how do I know that that's the case? D'tanan. Machtachin es hadiluyin lifnei abeima. You're allowed to cut the gourds before an animal. Ves hanavela lifnei haklavim. And you're allowed to cut up a dead animal in front of the dogs. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda says, Im lo haisen nevela erev Shabbos asura. If it wasn't already a nevela on erev Shabbos, so then it's going to be prohibited. Because it's not prepared for those dogs to use, because it wasn't a nevela at that time. So Alma. So that's the Mishnah. Again, this is a Mishnah in Shabbos Daf Kuf Nun Vav Amud Bet, and so we say. So we see Kevan Delo Itchan Metmol, since it was not prepared yesterday, Asura, it's prohibited. Hachinami, here too. Kevan Delo Itchan Metmol, Asura, because it wasn't prepared yesterday, right? This animal was alive yesterday. It wasn't prepared yesterday, so it's going to also be prohibited. So that would have been a good answer for me, but Amrle Abaye realizes, me dummy, are they really comparable? Hazami karamuchan la'adam. 1 second. When you have the situation that the animal was initially cut up for dog food, it was already prepared for human consumption. V'hashta muchan l'klavim, right? And now it's for dogs, right? Before the animal died on Shabbos, it was a potential human consumed animal. We're talking about an animal that is kosher, and if you would have slaughtered it properly, even though clearly it ended up being on its deathbed, it would have been kosher for a human to eat. But now, after it has died of its own causes and is a nevela, now it's only dog food. So that is different from our situation. Hacha mi'ikara muchan la'adam, v'hashta muchan la'adam. Before it was slaughtered, it was food for a human, and even now, after it's slaughtered, it's food for a human. Meaning, before that person might have thought, I want to use this as an animal to eat, and so as a result, there's no change. So who knows whether Rebbe Yehuda would really say, based on this Mishnah alone, that our situation in our Mishnah would actually be prohibited on Shabbos. Meaning, if the animal was slaughtered on Shabbos, maybe you can eat it because before Shabbos it was set aside for human consumption, and now on Shabbos, now that it's been slaughtered, it's also set aside for human consumption. So mi savrat behemoth b'chaya lachilo. 1 second. Do you think that an animal, when it's alive, is really for food? Behemoth b'chaya legadel medes. No, it's for raising more animals. That's why you keep an animal alive. So as a result, it wasn't set aside for food. And so my explanation is still good, because most animals that are alive are not for food. They're for raising more animals. And so as a result, when now the animal dies on Shabbos, just as you cannot feed it to the dogs on Shabbos, so too, if it's slaughtered on Shabbos, you can't feed it to humans on Shabbos, because the purpose has changed. Abaye responds, Ihachi, 1 second, Behema l'Rebbe Yehuda b'yom tov hechi shachatinan. How can you ever slaughter an animal on Yontif if, based on your statement that an animal, when it's alive, is never for food and is always for raising additional animals for breeding? Well, then you can't slaughter an animal on Yontif, because you would be changing its purpose. Even though slaughtering on Yontif, the preparation of food, is permitted, the concept of muksa still exists. And if something is not set aside for food, it's still going to be muksa. And so as a result, how could you do that? So Amar Lo, Rabbi Abba says back, omedis la'achila ve'omedis l'gadol. No, you can have it be set aside for both. Nishchata, if you do slaughter it, huvrara de la'achila omedis, then it's clear that you wanted it for slaughtering. Lo nishchata, huvrara de l'gadol omedis, meaning you only can have one purpose for something, but we have the ability to post facto determine which its real purpose was. And so as a result, when you slaughter the animal, the real purpose of the person has always been for food, and therefore it should be able to be eaten. And therefore, when he says in this Mishnah that it's not going to be kosher, it's going to be invalid to be eaten. And so as a result, and so since this animal was designated for breeding at the beginning of Shabbos, since there was no possibility of it being slaughtered on Shabbos, the meat is going to be considered muksa again, because he didn't even think that there was the possibility of somebody was going to violate Shabbos and slaughter it. So as a result, when it comes to the case of our Mishnah, it's going to certainly be muksa. But when it comes to the case of the animal that, and similarly, when it comes to the case of the animal that died on Shabbos, you didn't think that it was going to be, person food, because it was never slaughtered. And so as a result, although if it had been slaughtered not on Shabbos, it was clear that it would be food, but that you're not allowed to slaughter it on Shabbos, and therefore it's going to be a change in purpose, and that makes it muksa. No, but second, but you can't say that, because Rebbe Yehuda doesn't hold of Breira. And so as a result, we're back to our question, and we'll see where Rebbe Yehuda doesn't hold of Breira in a moment, but we're back to the question of if what Rabbi Abba is saying is true, that a person has the thought that the animal when it's alive is going to be food for people, and now that it's been slaughtered on Shabbos, it's still food for people, and so therefore it shouldn't be muksa, and therefore it's not clear that Rabbi Yehuda is the author of our Mishnah. Is our question that's still standing, given that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold of Breira. Again, we want to know that Rabbi Yehuda would say that that in the case where somebody slaughters something on Shabbos, that you cannot eat it on Shabbos. And so our first thought was to say, by Rabbi Abba, was to say, well, isn't this a change in purpose that makes it muksa? And the answer is, at least so far, is no. You can't say that, because really before Shabbos and on Shabbos, it's always been intended for food, because Rabbi Yehuda does not hold of Breira. So it's not possible to say that there were multiple things that were intended. So Minalan, how, back in the Gemara, how do I know that in fact Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold of Breira? So we're at the fifth line from the bottom, third word from the end of the line. So Miditanya, if you want, we could say that it's from the following brisa. Halokeach yayin v'beina kutim, that if you buy wine from kutim, and now you need to take the truma and meiser from it, omer, you are, and Rashi points out very helpfully, omer shnei lugin. If we take a look at Rashi, second line, im ein lo kelim, second of the wide lines near the bottom of Rashi, im ein lo kelim lahafrish. We're dealing with a situation where he does not have any vessels to separate in the trumas and meisers into. O shahaisa chashecha belel Shabbos, or it's about to become nightfall on Shabbos, she'ein shahut lahafrish, that there's not enough time to do all of the separation. So in either of those cases, what can the person do now that he wants to be able to eat this, drink this wine on Shabbos? Omer, Shnei lugin sha'ani atid lahafrish, the two lug that I will take, harei hein truma. That's going to be the truma, meaning 2 lug out of 100 lug are going to be truma. Asara, 10 a lug, masa rishon, 10 are going to be meiser rishon. Tisha, meiser sheni, 9 are going to be meiser sheni, because after you've taken away, on some level, this is all. The simple read is that this is all based on rounding, right? So, when I say, well, I now have 98 left, so I need to take 9.8. Well, we'll round it to 10. Now that I have 88 left, I need to take 8.8. So I will round it to 9. And so as a result, umechel, and then you can redeem the meiser sheni, the shosa miyad, and now you can drink the whole thing immediately. And at the end of the day, after Shabbos is over, and when you have other vessels, you can pour out the 2 lug of truma and the 10 lug of meiser, and you will be all good. Divrei Rabbi Meir. That's what Rabbi Meir says. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Osrin. However, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon all say that this is prohibited. Now, isn't this showing that Rabbi Yehuda rejects Breira? Because what is it that Rabbi Meir is allowing us to do? Or Rabbi Meir is allowing us to say that I will identify exactly which 2 lug of wine are truma and which 10 lug of wine are meiser, but I can do it later. I don't need to identify it specifically now. That is the case of Breira. And the fact that Rabbi Yehuda says, along with Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, that it's prohibited, shows that Rabbi Yehuda rejects Breira. And therefore, again, this is showing that that Rabbi Abba's answer doesn't work for us. So in second, that's not necessarily true, that in fact, that you can learn from this brisa that Rabbi Yehuda rejects Breira, because Hasam Keditani Taima. We gave a reason over there. Amrulo Rabbi Meir. They, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon, they were saying to Rabbi Meir, don't you agree that in fact there's a chance that the container may break, v'nimtza, and then you will never have taken the truma and meiser, and as a result, it will turn out shoset tvalim u'mafreya, that retroactively the person would have drunk tevel, food that had no trumas and maestros taken. So Amar Lahen, Lekesha Yibaka, I'll worry about it when it breaks. Meaning, I don't believe that you have to protect yourself from unlikely situations that are not, that are not really the most likely case, and therefore I will permit it. So, but the bottom line is the response and the rationale for Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon may have nothing to do with Breira. It may simply be that they are concerned about the fact that there may be a breakage, and then you're going to have sinned. And so, as a result, this is not a proof that Rabbi Yehuda rejects Breira. So Ella Miditani Ayo. It's from the Brisa taught by Ayo that says the following: Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ein Adam Masna Al Shnei Dvarim Kechad. You cannot condition one thing on two things at the same time. What are we talking about? We're going to be talking about a situation of setting up an Erev. Ella, and the story is as follows: you have a rabbi who's going to come to town. He is going to set up either on the eastern side of the city or the western side of the city at the Tchum line, or maybe over the Tchum line, his shear and his class. And you want to be able to go to it. And so as a result, you want to have an Eruv Chatzeros that is, an Eruv, to be able to go out outside the Tchum, an Eruv Tchum, to go outside the Tchum in order to be able to go to the shear. But the problem is you don't know which side. And so as a result, you can say the following: Ella imba chacham the Mizrach. You can say, if the person who's going to teach the class is coming from the east, Eruv Mizrach. So then my Eruv is going to be on the east. Lemarav, Eruv Lemarav. And if he comes from the west, my Eruv will be on the west. And that all works. However, the Elu Lakan or Lakan, low. But if he says, listen, I'm worried that one person is going to come from the east, one person is going to come from the west, and I want to be able to decide which of the places it's going to work on my own. Meaning, I want to basically set up an Eruv on the east side and the west side of the city, and say that on Shabbos I should be able to decide which of them is retroactively valid. And here Rabbi Yehuda is saying you can't do that, showing that Rabbi Yehuda rejects the concept of Breira. And in fact, it was analyzed about that. We discussed this brisa. It was dealt with. Why is it that you can't do it on both sides? To ain Breira, because there's no Breira. Mizrach Umarav Nami ain Breira. But 1 second, isn't each independent side also a case of Breira? Meaning, if the point is that the rabbi is going to come tomorrow, well, then it's tomorrow that I'm going to know which side he came on. And so as a result, that is also, even a one-sided situation, is Breira. So Rabbi Yochanan explained, no, there's a difference, that what we're dealing with is ukvar b'chacham. The situation is the following. You have one chacham who came. He's already here for Shabbos, but we just don't know which side he came on. So in that situation, you can set up a Tanai now to say, listen, the rabbi's here. I just don't know which side he's on. So I'm going to set up I set up my Erev both on the east and the west, and whichever side he's on, that's the side I want my Erev to be. And that is totally fine and doesn't involve Breira, because there's no retroactivity to it. It's just God knows which side it's on. The world knows which side it's on. You just don't know which side it's. And so as a result, that kind of clarification is okay. Whereas if you have two rabbis, even if they've come before Shabbos, And now you want to be able to choose which one of them you're going to hear on Shabbos. That you can't do because that would involve Breira. That would involve retroactivity because you cannot have two Eruvim, one on the east side and one on the west side, because that's not permitted. And so as a result, we've now shown that Rabbi Yehuda does hold of Breira, and that causes us to unwind Rabbi Abba's answer, because Rabbi Abba's answer relied on Breira for being a position that Rabbi Yehuda would agree to. Because without Breira, there would be, based on Rabbi Abba's answer, there would be no way for Rabbi Yehuda to allow shechting on Yontif, because every animal that's alive. Rabbi Abba thought that Rabbi Yehuda would consider that as if it was set aside for breeding. And the only way you would allow it to be to be considered for eating is if you slaughtered it on Shabbos, slaughtered it on Yontif, and then we would say retroactively it was clearly set aside for eating. But he doesn't hold of Breira. And so as a result, Rabbi Abba's answer goes away, and we need to find a new one. So Ella Amar Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef offers the next possible answer. And we are now on Yud Daled Amar Bet. The Rav Yosef line is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines down in the Gemara. Ella Amar Rav Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda D'Chelem Hu. It's Rabbi Yehuda's ruling in connection with vessels, meaning that until something is a vessel, or unless something is a vessel, you're in general not supposed to handle it on Shabbos. D'Tanan, Kol HaKelim Nitalim b'Shabbos. You're allowed to handle all kinds of vessels on Shabbos. Shivrihen Nitalim. And even their broken pieces can be handled, as long as they can do some kind of work with it. Meaning, even a broken vessel retains its vessel status and therefore does not become muksa, as long as you could use it. Shivrei areva. So, for example, a broken bowl, you can use it to cover the mouth of a pitcher. Shivrei zchuchis, a broken glass, you can use it to cover a smaller flask. So that's the position of the Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda further qualifies it. It is not enough for there to just be some purpose, but rather Rabbi Yehuda Omer, uvilvad shehu osin me'ein melachtan. They have to be able to do the same sort of work that they were able to do before. So as a result, when you have a mixing bowl, a bowl, shivrei areva, right? A bowl, a container for mixing, litzok, litocha, L'tochan mikpah. You have to be able to put some porridge into it, meaning it still needs to have a base kibble, some kind of container. Shivrei zuchuchis, and similarly glass. L'tzok tochan shemen. You have to be able to pour oil into it. The bottom line is that both of these things, they have to be able to be used for their same purpose. And so similarly, Me'ein melachtan, in the implication is if it does the same kind of work, then it's not going to be muksa. Me'ein melacha acheres lo. But if it's going to be a different kind of work, it's going to be muksa. So alma kaven de lo itchan me'et molachach melacha, since, right, because this utensil was not fit for this purpose, so then asire, it's forbidden to use the fragments and it's considered muksa. So since this was not prepared yesterday as slaughtered food, asura, it's going to be prohibited. Again, Abaye comes to the rescue and says this is not necessarily a good proof. Amarle Abaye, midami, are these cases really comparable? Hasam mi'ikara kli, v'hashta shever kli. 1 second. Whether you look at it beforehand or afterwards, in both cases, it is a vessel. I'm sorry. In both cases, it's a completely different thing, because once it was a full-fledged vessel, and now it's not even a vessel, it's a broken vessel that has a totally new purpose. And so Vahabale Nola Vaser. It's completely new because you can't do what you did with it before. And so that's why it's forbidden. But Hacha Mikara Uchla, beforehand, I was thinking that it was going to be food. Ulvasof Ochel, and in the end, it is food. Ochla to Ifras, it's just food that's now become separated from the animal. Bisham inanle l'Rebbe Yehuda de Amar uchla de Ifras shapir dami, and we know that Rebbe Yehuda is the one who says that when food becomes separated, that it's still considered food. And how do I know that? Ditnan, because there's a Mishnah, and this is a Mishnah in Shabbos Daf Kuf Mem Gimel Amud Bet, where it says the following: Ein sochatin as haperus lahotzi mehen mashkin. You are not allowed to squeeze fruit to get juice out of them on Shabbos. Being yatsu me'atzman asurin, and even if it comes out on its own, it's prohibited. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda says, if, however, it's not meant to be squeezed and it's meant to be eaten. So, for example, a pomegranate, you eat the pomegranate seeds and it's not necessarily going to be set aside for juicing. Hayotze mehen mutter. Now what juice comes out is going to be permitted. The im lamashkin. If, however, you set aside that same pomegranate for juicing, hayotze mehen asur. What flows out is going to be prohibited. So we see that the separation of some food from another food, namely the juice from the fruit, everything is going to be okay. And so as a result, that shows that when you have this shechted animal, it's going to still, maybe it should still be okay, because even before Shabbos, it was set aside for food. Now that it's been slaughtered, it is food. And so as a result, it's just food. And so as a result, this explanation, according to Rav Yosef, doesn't work. 1 second, though. I can show you 1 second, because you have to take a look at what was said about that Mishnah. Lav itmar Allah, wasn't it said about that Mishnah? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel. Now, again, it's important to note this is Rav Yehuda, not the Rebbe Yehuda that we're attributing our Mishnah to, and the statement that on that same Shabbos or Yontif, the Shabbos or Yom Kippur, that the animal is slaughtered, it's going to be forbidden as muksa, but or forbidden to be eaten, not necessarily as muksa. We're posing it as muksa right now, but this is different. This is Rabbi Yehuda, the Amora, is saying in the name of Shmuel. Moda haya Rabbi Yehuda l'chachamim, that Rabbi Yehuda agreed to the chachamim b'salei zeitim v'anavim, when he had a basket of olives and grapes. Alma came into l'schita kaime, since it was specifically that kind of food is always or generally for pressing and for squeezing out the juice and the liquid. Yahiv daita. So as a result, when it happens, the owner is going to be on. Let's take a look. Moda Rebbe Yehuda. It's from the bottom of Rashi on Yudalon Bet. It's 7 lines up, middle of the line. Moda Rebbe Yehuda b'sali zeitim ba'anavim. Shafilu hatsni an la'achila. Even if you were to set aside them for food, Howil v'rov b'nei adam sochatinosam. Since most people squeeze them, Hainami mamlich alayhu. This person will always also consider that or change his mind towards it. V'ish sharis lemashkin shezavu mehen. And if in fact we permit him to have the liquid that flows out of them naturally on Shabbos, osi lemischat, he may then come to squeeze, and so we have a gzeira that we're concerned about. And kaven de lahaki kaime stama novim, since most people look at grapes and consider them for squeezing, or olives, and the same thing. Yahiv daite alayhu. continuing on in Rashi, he's going to think to himself, Lamashkin, once a little bit of juice has come out, you know what? He'll say, oh, maybe I'll just make it all for Mashkin. Havu Mashkin, Havale, Niskaima, Machshavato. And now that he'll have changed his mind to say that it's going to be for liquid, it will have fulfilled his thought as a result that the juice that came out on its own is effectively consistent with his thought. Vigzera Shema Yischot. And so as a result, we have to be concerned that maybe he will come to squeeze them. Upluksayu, and where do Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim argue? Bitutim, the Rimonim. They only argue about Tutim and Rimonim. And so as a result, so Hachanami, Kaven de Lashchita Kaima, since an animal is generally set aside for slaughter, Yahiv Daite, we are concerned about it. So take a look at, I'm sorry, I went back into the Gemara. I should have said that. So Hachanami is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines up, middle of the line. Hachanami, Kaven de Lashchita Kaima, Yahiv Daite. So since here, this animal is for slaughtering, even though maybe he might have had, some other thing in mind namely for it to be for breeding. Now that it has been slaughtered, he'll have in mind to possibly use it, as Rashi tells us. Yahiv daite alaihu. I'm sorry. So it's a Yahiv daite. I'm sorry, Hachinami. It's 1, 2, 3, 5 lines up from the bottom of Rashi, end of the line in Rashi. Kaven de l'shchita kaima Yahiv daite. The mishkata achil. If it's slaughtered, he's going to use it for food. The kaven de daite bahacha, and since he may think to himself this, gazrina, we have to have a gzeira. Ba'nami I sharis le v'achila asi lechatchila lemishchat. That if we permit somebody to eat this animal on Shabbos, it will end up. The person may then think to himself, "Oh, I'll just slaughter an animal on Shabbos," and we so therefore we have a gzeira because we're worried that somebody will come to slaughter an animal on Shabbos. We're going to effectively say that this food is consumed. Okay, but 1 second, who was it that gave that explanation of? Go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm listening to you.
Yeah, so we lose throughout this year. I think when you move,
okay, doesn't ways,
blurred. But anyway, so that's a separate. I mean, we blur. But at the previous Rashi, we talked about the grapes and the olives. But people eat grapes and olives on Shabbat. There's no issur to eat them. Even the Shema, you might squeeze it. We do eat them. We permit people to eat grapes and olives.
Oh, absolutely. This is. You're absolutely right. This is the what we prohibit is if any of the liquid were to come out of the grapes or olives, the liquid would be prohibited out of concern that it will result in you then decide you were going to squeeze the grapes and olives.
Oh, that liquid.
That liquid is exactly. The fruit itself is permitted. You can eat the fruit. But if any liquid comes out, then we are concerned that you will then think, hey, maybe it's going to be. Now, again, we're about to change this because this statement was by Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel. And we're going to now say that is rejected because take a look. We're now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7, 8 lines up in the Gemara.
If you put the olives or the grapes in a bowl with other fruit or vegetables, and you put a chunk of tomato on it, and it leaks, the olive leaks, you have to throw out the whole plate of food?
No, I don't think you have to throw out the whole plate of fruit. But you're not allowed to specifically take out all the grapes and olives from that bowl and then drink the liquid. But again, that's not even necessary. To the extent that
I didn't hear a single word. We lost your sound there. Back and forth with this.
Okay, so hold on. Hold on, I'm sorry. My internet connection is not as stable as usual. All right. So again, if we're about to reject this explanation of Rabbi Yehuda, now I actually think we paskin like the Chachamim, but the bottom line that you're not allowed to squeeze fruit for their juice. But if it and therefore if it comes out on its own, you cannot empty the bowl and drink that juice. That's what's prohibited. But if you're going to, the fact that it is on some fruit of yours that it's in the same bowl and a little bit has leaked out, I don't think that you're not purposely drinking that. You're trying to eat the grape, and so as a result, I don't think. Again, this is just this is a gzeira that we're concerned about it. So as a result, we don't want you to have the incentive to squeeze more out. But if you're just eating the grapes that are in that bowl, I think that would be permitted. Again, you can ask
but I believe from what I learned, we're allowed to cut a piece of lemon and put it in a glass of tea. Now we're not squeezing it; we drop it in. But with the hot tea, and presumably some of the liquid from the lemon leaks into the tea, and you're drinking that tea, right?
You're absolutely right. The laws of schita are much more complicated than we're going to be able to cover, in this Daf Yomi class. And the point is that you're allowed to squeeze a lemon on food, and right. So there are certain situations where it's permitted. What you cannot do is squeeze that lemon into the empty cup. Into the empty cup, it's prohibited. Right. And again, that is what's prohibited, and so that's what we're talking about when it comes to olives and grapes, where it's again where we are more concerned about it from a juicing perspective. The gzeira is that if juice comes out on its own, again based on this Mishnah in Masechet Shabbos, we're going to say that it's going to be prohibited. But the bottom line is that we're about to note that Rabbi Yehuda Rav does not agree with this statement, and so that we're going to undermine this point to begin with. So let's take a look. We got to let's just finish this, and because I want to finish the next answer as well. So Midihu Taima El Rav. But second, who do we need to explain everything to? We need to explain everything according to Rav, because Rav is the one. If we go all the way back to right after our Mishnah, who was it that said? It was Rav Huna said that Chia bar Rav Mishmei Rav, that it was said in the name of Rav that Asura Bachil Yoma. So the explanation, and then we said it's Rabbi Yehuda. So when we say that Rabbi Yehuda has to be consistent, the statement of Rabbi Yehuda that we're looking for is the statement that is consistent with the fact that consuming the meat that is slaughtered on Shabbos is going to be prohibited until the end of Shabbos. It's got to be consistent with the view of Rav. And so you've made it consistent with the view of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel. But Ha'amar Rav, Chalok Haya Rabbi Yehuda, Afilu B'Salei Zeisim B'Anavim. That Rav says that Rabbi Yehuda even disagrees with respect to a basket of olives and grapes, meaning that if the olives and grapes are set aside for eating, Rabbi Yehuda would say that in fact you can have the liquid that comes out of them and that it isn't a problem. And so as a result, therefore, Rabbi Yehuda's statement about separating food applies generally. Namely, that once you have food that is kosher on Shabbos, if you separate a piece of it, it would still be kosher. And so now that we say that, when we have this animal that has been slaughtered on Shabbos, we're effectively separating a piece of the animal from the rest of the animal. The animal was set aside for food before Shabbos. It's set aside for food now on Shabbos. And so as a result, this statement of Rabbi Yehuda is not sufficient to prove that Rabbi Yehuda would say that an animal slaughtered on Shabbos is going to be prohibited, because his statement of muktzah with respect to the fact that it changed its purpose is not really true with respect to the food. It went from something that was edible to something that was edible, unlike going from a full-fledged vessel to a broken vessel, which is something totally new. And so as a result, we offer a third effort at trying to find the Rebbe Yehuda statement. And so as a result, we say, Amar Rav Sheshis, Braid Rav Edi, Rebbe Yehuda Denerosi. It's Rebbe Yehuda in connection with the lamps. Where is it? What's the statement? Tanya, we have a brisa. When it comes to a brand new lamp, well, all a lamp is a bit of earthenware that is able to hold the oil and has a place for the wick. Well, before you use it, it is capable of being used for multiple purposes. You can hold water in it. You could hold other liquids in it. But now, so metal still in Ner Chadash, you're allowed to move around a new one. Yashan, but you can't move around an old one. Divrei Rebbe Yehuda, because once it's old, you're not going to use it for any purpose other than as a candle, as Rashi says. Ner Chadash, Shelo Hidliku Bo Me'olam. That's never been lit. Ner Shel Cheres. We're dealing with a lamp made out of earthenware. The Keshehu Chadash, when it's new. Chazilim Merame Beiperi. You can hold fruit in it. You could do a lot of things with it. So Aval Lo Yashan, but not an old one. Continuing on in Rashi, second to last line of Rashi on Yudal and Amabet. De Mukzahi, it's Mukzahu, Machmas Mius. It's Mukza because it's considered disgusting for using it for other purposes. Shadas Katsabo, you've essentially set it aside from yourself. V'hach Behemanami. And so this animal too, Kishakidish Hayom, when the day began, he muktzah machmas aver minachai. It was effectively aver minachai, and therefore it was prohibited, and therefore out of your mind, and therefore shalom nishchata, because it wasn't slaughtered, and therefore it would be muktzah. So just like the used lamp is muksa, so too the unslaughtered animal is muksa, and even when it's slaughtered, it stays muksa. So 1 second, Amar deshamas leila Rebbe Yehuda, but muktzas machas miyas. 1 second, all you've shown us from this statement is that there is this idea of muksa because something is disgusting. Muktzah machmas iser mishamas le. But have you ever heard Rebbe Yehuda say that something is muksa because it's prohibited? That's the lesson that you're trying to get us to take, because the animal, the reason that you're saying it's muksa is because it's aver minachai when it's alive. So yes, Rebbe Yehuda does say that. And this D'Tanan actually should be D'Tanya, according to the Masoras Hashas. D'Tanya, Rebbe Yehuda Omer. We have a brisa where Rebbe Yehuda says, as we turn to the top of Tesvav Amud Aleph, Kol Neira Shamatekas Metaltalin. You're allowed to move around metal lamps. Chutz min haner shedliku bo ba'osa Shabbos, except for a lamp that was lit during that Shabbos. So doesn't that show, because it is usser, it's muksa because it was prohibited to move then that lamp when it was lit, because that would be an isser, because we're concerned about you accidentally stoking the fire or putting out the fire, etc. And so as a result, here too, it's going to be muksa because of the prohibition of aver minachai. But I'll show you there's a very important difference. Dilma shiny hasam. Maybe the case of a lamp that is lit is different. Duhu dachile biyadayim, because the person himself lit the candle, and so he took an action that made this lamp muksa. And so as a result, that does not show that in fact Rabbi Yehuda generally has the principle of something that is usser, is considered muksa. And so as a result, we have fully rejected all three explanations. And so we are going to need a fourth and final explanation that is going to touch on an issue that is not involving a muksa, but rather involves a different concept. But for that concept, you will need to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. My apologies for the poor reception today, and hopefully tomorrow's reception will be better.
Well, why is the case of two rabbis coming to town or in town already, why is that a Breyer issue? Why is that retroactive? If he then decides he wants to put Eruv this place or that place.
Because he has an Eruv in both places. Of course, the Eruv needs to be set up Erev Shabbos, right, but he's only deciding which one to use on Shabbos. And so only on Shabbos will we know which one of those is his actual Eruv. And therefore, the other one is nothing, but we only find that out on Shabbos. So the one that is determined to be his actual placement of an Eruv, the one that is placed, is only determined on Shabbos. That's retroactive because you can't make an Eruv on Shabbos. You have to have made it before Shabbos. So the before Shabbos action is being affected by his thought on Shabbos, and that's retroactive. Whereas in the case where we're only dealing with one side and we don't know which side the rabbi's on, we're dealing with a situation where the rabbi is already there. And so there we do know, meaning I might not know, but you or the rabbi himself knows which side my Eruv is actually on. And that information will eventually get to me. And so at that point, it's not retroactive. When I set it up on that side on Erev Shabbos, that was my only true Eruv. The other one was never an Eruv to begin with. And so that isn't retroactive, and therefore no Breira is involved in that situation.
So it was, but there was an Eruv, quote, set up on both sides. It could have been.
Correct.
But we used this one because he was there. We just didn't know where he was. I didn't know where he was, but something.
Exactly.
So therefore, that was the Eruv that was set up. So it's not.
So it's not retroactive.
So we're not considering it now as
it's not. It's not as it's not only when you find out that retroactively it became good. Like I said, the person himself, the rabbi himself, was there already. He knows that it's that this is the good one and the other one is nothing. Because in both cases, you're going to say, I'm making this Eruv if the rabbi is on this side. I'm making the Eruv if the rabbi is on this side. And so as a result, when you said those words on the wrong side, you did nothing. When you said those words on the correct side, you made an Eruv. And so that was true at the beginning of Shabbos. Unlike the case where there's a rabbi on both sides. And again, the rabbi could be there on both sides even before Shabbos. But your words, because of what you're going to say, is not, here's my Eruv if the rabbi's on this side, because the rabbi, you know that the rabbi's on this side. The words that you're going to use is, here's the Eruv that if I go in this direction to hear this rabbi, this will be my Eruv. And you say the same thing on the other side. But that decision is not being made, or at least the world doesn't know about that decision until later. And so as a result, that is a retroactive look as opposed to something that is happening at Erev Shabbos, at when Shabbos is beginning.
Well, that is retroactive?
Yeah, that's retroactive. If you have rabbis on both sides, and I say, I want this to be my Erev if I decide that I like the Eastern rabbi, and I want this to be my Erev if I decide I like the Western rabbi, that is going to be a retroactive decision, because my decision of which rabbi I like and I want to go here is made after Shabbos began. And so I will only know which of those Eruvim is valid after Shabbos began. And so that is a retroactive look. And the point is that Rebbe Yehuda doesn't hold of Breira. And so as a result, Rebbe Yehuda can't use Breira to decide which one is valid and which one is not. It has to be valid at the time. And so that's why we end up saying that the situation with the rabbi on the east alone or the rabbi on the west alone is where the rabbi is already there. And so as a result, when you set it up on the correct side, you are actually setting up the Eruv for Shabbos. And it is a good Eruv at that moment. And the other Eruv that you set up is just nothing. And so as a result, there is no retroactivity in a one-side situation. But in a two-side situation, there is.
But in the two-side situation, does that only apply if there are two rabbis? To say that it's retroactive, that it's Breira? Could it also apply if there's only one rabbi? You have to have rabbis in town in order to say that you create a situation where there's no Breira?
If the rabbi comes after Shabbos begins, then also a one-side situation is Breira. So if you set it up on the right side, on the eastern side and the western side, and your statement is, if the rabbi comes in this direction, it's going to be a valid Eruv on the east, and if it comes in the west, it's going to be a valid Eruv in the west, and the rabbi has not yet come, well, then you're absolutely right. When he comes on Shabbos, let's say there's another town that's not too far away, so he's able to reach the outer banks of the Eruv. So then you're right. That would also be retroactive. And that's why we need to distinguish. And we say that the case of one side is where the rabbi was already there on Erev Shabbos. Because you're exactly right. A one-sided case can also be a case of Breira.
Oh, so only if he's already in town.
Correct.
There's no Breira case. There's no.
Exactly. All right. Yeshikoach, looking forward to continuing our learning together tomorrow. And again, tomorrow we get the actual reason, the actual statement of Rebbe Yehuda that is consistent with his holding the position that an animal shechted on Shabbos is going to be kosher. Is kosher, but only after Shabbos. It's not going to be kosher to be eaten on Shabbos. All right. Have a wonderful day.